All right.
Herkese merhaba. Bu sefer çok teşekkür ediyorum tekrar TSRM Derneği'ne bizlere bu fırsatı verdiği için. Bu dönem arkadaşlarım ASRM 2023'e katıldılar. Hatta bizim de kendimizin yaptığı da bir çalışmamız vardı. Onları da sundu Olga. Ben size şimdi ilk baş onları tanıtayım hatırlamaları için. Stephanie Nichols, PhD kendisi, laboratuvarımızın sorumlusu, menajeri esasında. Olga Chaplia, o da gene senior embriyolog laboratuvarımızda. Ve ben aynı şekilde Yale İnfertilite laboratuvarında 3 kişi olarak çalışıyoruz. Şu anda aramızda bir de Evrim Ünsal arkadaşımız var. 4 kişi olarak hep beraber çalışıyoruz laboratuvarımızda. Bu sene, geçen sene bizler katılmıştık ASRM'ye. Bu sene onlar katıldılar. Biz de onların yerine laboratuvarımızı bekledik, öyle diyelim. Herkesin de bahsettiği gibi özellikle şimdi Stephanie sizlere e, laboratuvar uygulamalarında Artificial Intelligence konusundan bahsedecek. Olga da köken olarak genetikten geldiği için daha çok PGTA konularıyla ilgili sizleri bilgilendirecek. Daha sonra da sorularımızı alacağız. Ben şimdi sözü Stephanie'ye bırakıyorum. Hello Stephanie. So I just introduce you ladies. So as far as I know, you're going to present artificial intelligence in the
Yes, I
IVF
am.
lab, right? The abstracts about artificial intelligence. Now, scene
Okay.
is yours.
Thank you, Murat, for that lovely introduction. So we thought, since New Orleans is difficult to reach from Turkey, and many of you probably were not able to attend the meetings, why don't we just cover some of the quick highlights of what was hot, what was popular, what did people want to hear about at ASRM 2023. So to start with, this is a little outside of AI, of course, but one of the biggest topics at the conference, and it's really relevant to the United States, but it also might have, implication outside of the U.S., is the topic of reproductive rights. So I'm just going to touch on that briefly. It could kind of foster some interesting conversations. It certainly did at the conference. So basically, about a year ago, we had our Supreme Court turned over a decision that was originally created in the 70s, Roe v. Wade, that basically legalized or federally protected abortion access. So this decision changed that. So, for 50 years, American women had the constitutional right to medically safe abortions. That was overturned. So now the federal protection is no longer there. It's been handed to our individual states. And we have 50 states and 50 very different cultural attitudes and landscapes that kind of change by state what the laws may be. Now, you may think, well, this is just about abortion rights, but the problem is that when we talk about reproductive rights, that is also applicable to our own field, because how
Stephanie,
do
I'm so
we
sorry.
restrict?
Could you please just
Go
turn
ahead.
on the camera, please?
Oh, yeah, hold on. Sorry. Here we go. Okay. So basically, part of how the decisions are created or the laws are created is that they want to define personhood. And in some cases, personhood begins at fertilization, which, there's no real scientific, legal, or ethical definition of personhood, but it's used as a word to kind of push an agenda in this particular case. Now, if we are going to define personhood like that, obviously that has implications for IVF. Every embryo is technically a person in that case. That has many, ramifications for what we do on a daily basis. So basically there was the big opening talk. There was a plenary on this topic and how, we should advocate for change as reproductive activists ourselves. So I thought that was really interesting. That may not be totally applicable in Turkey, but I do believe you have some strict restrictions in place as well. And of course, there's many cultural differences, but there could be some implication to the field of IVF as far as how do we define our embryos? Can we bank embryos? What is the fate of that embryo in the end? So just some food for thought there, but there were quite a few, besides that plenary, there were quite a few sessions and talks outside of the sessions that really talked about reproductive rights and what we can do in our own field to kind of advocate for ourselves and for our practice, etc. Next, we'll go to artificial intelligence. So of course, you can imagine in the past few years, this is a hot topic. In the past few years, this has become more popular. There are more talks. We had 2 sessions just focusing on AI and ART. I just chose a handful here to kind of go over for you. Of course, you can go check it out yourself. The abstracts are available online for free. So one of the prize papers, so there were 12 prize papers from the Scientific Congress. One of them was talking about AI. And so this very well done study basically evaluated the performance of a machine learning model to rank embryos for transfer. So basically, this model was developed previously, and it predicts the likelihood of clinical pregnancy using embryo morphology grades that were assigned by embryologists using Gardner, and also combining that with the day of development. That model was trained on data from over 12,000 single blast transfers from across several different U.S. clinics and over an 8-year time period, a 7-year time period. So this study wanted to test that model to see how well it performed compared to live or a reader or an embryologist who would also match and grade themselves. So they included data from close to 450 single blastocyst transfers from those 10 different clinics that weren't part of the development of the original model. So what they did was they created these patient panels, and each panel had a few embryos that were matched by age and by race and other, characteristics. And then they had a group of embryologists that would select their top embryo for transfer, and that would be considered the control. And then they used the machine learning model to select the top embryo for transfer. And they compared the clinical pregnancy rate. So they knew the outcome of those. I mean, they were double blinded. So the tests and, of course, the readers or the embryologists did not know the outcome. And they tested to see how well each arm did. All right, so it turned out that the clinical pregnancy rate for the live person or the embryologist was 61%, and the machine learning model was 62%, so not different. So they basically came to the conclusion that using that machine learning model, it's equivalent to manual embryo selection, and that that machine learning model could be used to select the top embryo for transfer, and you would expect a similar performance from those embryos compared to an experienced embryologist. All right. So, I mean, that's really the theme of most of these talks that were presented there. So we'll go to another one that came out of the art oral abstract session that focused on AI in art. So there are, let me put this out there, and you likely already know, there are several different AI algorithms there, all trying to accomplish the same idea, right? To basically have an AI system that can analyze embryo morphology and then use that to choose your embryo for transfer, right? That's the bottom line. So this particular presentation basically used two different AI algorithms, and they created categories using those algorithms together. So let's see. One of the algorithms was trained on PGT testing for aneuploidy outcomes, and the second was trained on clinical pregnancy outcomes. And they call that the genetics AI and the viability AI. So they combined them together, and basically they wanted to correlate those with features indicative of embryo quality. So they basically defined these morphology categories: good, poor, and fair, and basically combining those two algorithms, they did see that the categories were effective to classify high and low quality embryos, and there was agreement, and they used SART and ASEBIR systems, ASEBIR systems. There was some heterogeneity in the fair morphology category, which is somewhat to be expected because, you know, when you're manually grading intermediate quality embryos, you're going to have some discrepancy there on how you're going to define that. But we did still see a high level of, I guess, consistency between embryologists, between the categories. And because they were able to show a correlation using both the US-based SART system of grading and also the European Union-based ASEBIR quality categories, they basically wanted to make the point that you could use this across multiple demographics. Okay. All right. All right. So this one is quite similar to the previous one, but it's from a different group. So again, they used two different AI algorithms, and they created an AI score called an EQ score. So slightly different than that previous talk. And they were in the same session, by the way, so that was kind of interesting. And also to add, that session was standing room only, and it spilled out into the hallway. You couldn't even get into that session. It was that popular. So that kind of tells you how hot that topic is, I guess I would say. So basically, they were looking at the EQ score, and they wanted to see its ability to identify embryos of at least a 3 grade for Gardner. And then they compared the EQ scores given to their test embryos, and they compared it to genetics and viability scores. And the results showed that the EQ score demonstrated a high predictive ability to identify these, like, further expanded, at least grade 3 using the Gardner system, euploid embryos. And not only using that, it was also able to predict embryo quality according to the European Union grading system, ASEBIR. So that EQ score combined outperformed both the genetics and the viability scores alone. So the the final output of this particular talk or presentation was basically that combining the scores is similar to the previous talk, of course. They're combining and creating an EQ score basically is the ideal way to go, right? So you have a one-step, non-invasive AI algorithm to identify embryos that are not only of high quality, but are also euploid. So this group feels as if they are closer to creating the best algorithm, at least in their hands, to do that for that role. Okay. Next. Oh, yes. Okay. So this was interesting. It's a little different. It's using a tool called Magenta, which is an egg scoring system. So basically, denuded eggs are scored using this AI image analysis. The higher the score, the better the quality, the higher the quality apparently it is. And previous studies have shown that a higher Magenta score is correlated to a higher blastocyst rate as well. All right, so they basically were using this AI tool to kind of look at oocytes, assess, a kind of score for them using Magenta, and then looking at what happens on the back end. But they were comparing different stimulation protocols to try to define if there was a difference in egg quality production at the end of that stimulation. Do you have a better, higher quality cohort of eggs in one protocol versus the other, as basically defined by the Magenta score? All right. So when they assessed each protocol, they saw that the GnRH antagonist protocol had a higher mean Magenta score of 5.1 than those from the GnRH agonist protocol. Even when they stratified by age, they saw the same outcome. And so their conclusion was that the GnRH antagonist protocol is significantly correlated with higher quality eggs from all patients, and these are uniquely identified by higher Magenta scores and confirmed by high blast rates. And they're kind of pushing forward this Magenta as a novel tool to provide a non-invasive objective analysis of eggs to further investigate impact of other factors that have an effect on oocyte quality. So I thought that was pretty interesting. It's a little different than thinking about AI as for just embryo scoring. I thought it was interesting to go to the very beginning and assign these egg scores. Of course, I have not used Magenta myself, so I can't say what I really think about it. I don't think there are enough studies yet out there. It's new, it's novel, like I said.
Stephanie, like here in GnRH agonist protocol means like triggered with GnRH agonist, right?
So they mean the PrEP protocol, so
Do we know that?
ovarian stimulation protocol. So the agonist is the long protocol, right? And then the antagonist, which is that shorter protocol. So it's not having to do with the trigger itself, it's with the PrEP. Yeah.
Trigger.
Okay.
I'm really curious about, do you remember that like we already working on some GnRH agonist trigger and the oocyte quality, and we checked out some mitochondrial stress on those eggs kind of study that we were talking about. Do you remember? Like that could be nice actually.
I'd be really curious to look more. I mean, I think we all, know that depending on your STIM protocol, you will have a different outcome. And what is the best STIM protocol? And is it specific to patient? Probably, but how can you tweak it so you have the optimal response from your patient? So this is just another tool to help you kind of, I guess, adjust your own stimulation protocols if you find you need to tweak it, I suppose. It's just a tool, another tool in the toolbox. By the way, probably an expensive one at this point too. I don't know, because it's new. All right. So sorry. Can you put the phone? All right, and then after that, because I know Olga is going to speak now about PGT, which will be very fun, I did want to also touch on there were several posters on AI. The poster sessions were, kind of quick and dirty. You had 5 minutes to present and hopefully get in a few questions. So as an observer of the posters, you really were ingesting very quickly what the point of the poster was. So I just picked out a couple. I'm not going to delve into them really. I'm just going to say, again, same thing. Basically, the hot topic is using AI to automate your morphology grading and developing deep learning systems. There's several out there, and so there were several reports on each system developed. They all performed very well to some degree, some better than others, I would say. I would say majority of the AI talks were about embryology grading, trying to correlate it to, blast grading. The other was trying to correlate it to euploidy if possible. To develop a non-invasive methodology for choosing your embryo for transfer, of course. And as I said, there were a few different AI talks, one looking at eggs, so that was a little different. And then a couple actually on looking on how to maximize or predict your patient's response to stimulation. How many days is it going to be? It basically was a system to have to control your patient's stim. So the deep learning network goal of that development was to make the decisions for you. So it was effective in the one poster that I saw. However, the time and the expense to develop a system that would make your patient's decisions for you is probably not worth the cost. You could do it much faster yourself, and you probably would still want to do it yourself, I would say. So the majority of the AI talks were on the progress of developing AI systems to have a non-invasive and precise and consistent way to choose your embryos for transfer. That's basically all of it in a nutshell. So there you go.
Actually, there's one more I think the oral presentation. I was just checking the abstracts. I was really interested in about they were picking sperm with AI like real time. They just tried to find out which one is the better. Actually, that was a really nice one too. So our problem, as like all embryologists familiar with that, our problem is we know, let's say it's 70% degeneration, DNA damage, like 85%, like 20%, whatever, but we don't know, while we're doing ICSI, we're not able to find out which one is the healthy and the other one is the bad. So there are some holotomographic light emission kind of things to find out which one is better. So I'm really curious about that one. I hope they can develop something.
It would be best then, that system with the magenta system together. Then you pick your sperm and your egg with your best egg for you, and that would be
and best sperm. Yeah, that would be nirvana kind of.
All right.
And now Dr. Chaplia.
Okay, let me check if you hear me well. And sound, Stephanie, sound.
It's off.
So sorry. No, like your sound on the computer. Thank you. Okay, good. I'm so sorry. I just don't want you to hear the echo. So I will just continue. My part is mainly about genetics and obviously embryos genetics. PGTA and SAR is an important part of our everyday practice. But still, there's a lot of questions emerging from the wide usage of genetic testing of embryos. And a very, very big talk was totally dedicated to the assessment of the current situation with all the flaws, pros and cons of genetic testing of embryos. This talk comprised of 3 parts. One of them was basically a genetic counselor talking and explaining why we now are kind of caught in the middle with getting too much information actually. So we are over-informed in regards of embryo testing, and the question is that are we eligibly over-informed to do this additional information that by now we get during the testing is the correct one, or it's just a artifact of the study. And from that point of view, more and more talks are dedicated to the actually questioning the mosaicism. As far as I remember, it's not the first year, it's not the second, it's not the third even. At the very beginning, when the mosaicism question arose, it was kind of fascinating, but nowadays it causes a lot of discussions. And if before that we were talking if actually it's possible to transfer low mosaic embryos and if it's possible to transfer high mosaic embryos. So nowadays the next step is the questioning if we actually can transfer the segmental aneuploidies, small segmental aneuploidies, and basically the genetic counseling with proper genetic counseling is the next step. So if the patient is out of the embryos that are considered to be euploid, and then the next step we checked low mosaics and there is no there, we cannot find them, and there is no high mosaic embryos. So the next step is actually questioning whether we can try to transfer the segmental aneuploidies, and by now the clinical data states that we can try and actually get normal pregnancy as a result. So the next set of the talk was about how we actually control the question about additional information and the embryo's disposal after that. It was the IVF laboratory director of New York Langone Clinic, and she presented 5 stages of their consent regarding PGT results. In 2010, they started with a general pre-IVF consent when all the embryos that were not considered to be normal, by the way, at that point it was not NGS, obviously it was array CGH. So at that point, they basically claim that every embryo that is not normal will be automatically discarded when the result is out. The next step for them in 2013 was to include non-diagnosed embryos, because we also have a set of embryos that didn't get any result, and at some point they were considered to be, well, we didn't get result, it's probably the embryo is not good. And because the embryos were not considered to be euploid, they were also under discard consent. So they stated that non-result embryos may be stored. And beginning from 2016, when slowly NGS entered the PGTA world, they switched to the other type of consent. So initially they started from the pre-IVF consent, and I know exactly that in some clinics still these pre-IVF consents, when patients state that every embryo that is considered to be abnormal, with appropriate, obviously, description what the laboratory believes to be abnormal, should be discarded, and the patient gives their permission to discard these embryos without special additional consent. Like, not good, kick them out. So at that point, this big laboratory, it's really huge lab in New York, they switched to the other type of consent. So all the embryos are basically stored and the embryos that are considered to be abnormal may be discarded, but only with additional signature of patient. So clinic basically cannot discard anything unless the patient gives a special permission for that. And their next stages slightly made these consents softer and softer. At the beginning, they said, okay, we're gonna start only store euploid embryos. At the very end, they are storing everything, because who knows, maybe in a couple of years, we will have absolutely, not experimental, but absolutely eligible transfer of embryos that are considered to be abnormal because they have segmental aneuploidies, and all these plenty of embryos will be already wiped out from the cryobanks, and all the chances of getting pregnant for these patients will be basically lost. So the third part of this big talk was from the lawyer, and that's a, let's say, quite unusual approach that, to my personal belief, is luckily didn't reach Eastern Europe and Asia. But it's all about whether the patient is able to sue the clinic if the clinic did something wrong according to patient understanding to the embryos. And there are a couple of approaches how the patient can claim us embryologists or the clinic overall to be guilty. So they may say that basically the embryologist was negligent, I don't know, dropped the dish, forgot to freeze the embryo. Is it negligence? Yes. Is it a breach of contract? Yes, because the clinic in the contract with the patient promised to provide the appropriate level of the service, and basically this contract was broken. Is it eligible for emotional distress claims? Of course, because we believe that every patient will use their embryos, every embryo is precious, and we try to be on the safe side with the patient on that. But the very interesting approach that already was tried in some lawsuits in the US is the claiming of wrongful death. So the patient, for example, claims that the clinic that unfortunately destroyed the embryo that was not supposed to be destroyed, or forgot to freeze the embryo that's supposed to be frozen, or dropped the dish and had all the embryos lost, may be claimed to be the reason of a wrongful death of a human being. And obviously the outcome of such a lawsuit, if it's gonna be positive for the patient, is like criminal responsibility, right? So by now, all of these wrongful death lawsuits were not approved by court, luckily. So they were turned out to be negligence or breach of contract all cases. But earlier or later, something like that happened, especially with regard to what Stephanie already mentioned, that in some states, by now, from the moment of fertilization, the embryo is considered to be a human being, live human being, and so basically loss of the embryo during to the inappropriate service is kind of homicide. But we will step out from this very, very scary point. I was sweating there in the hall when I was listening to that, literally, because I was thinking of all these possible situations when, for example, with regard to these consents that were signed for all the embryos that are not considered to be euploid to be discarded, clinic does that. But then in 10 years, embryos that are considered to be mosaic are basically already more euploid than abnormal. And the patient goes back to the clinic and claim, oh, by the way, it looks like you discarded my viable embryos. That was absolutely inappropriate. And what it seems to be now that courts don't know what to do with it. And neither do we. So let's be a little bit happy that patients in I hopefully for you guys, hopefully for me, patients in Eastern Europe and in Turkey do not prefer to go to court every time when they don't like something in their clinic and still rely on what their clinicians and embryologists say. But please try to be on the safe side, and everything that you do with regard to the mosaic embryos in your clinic should be very, very detailed, nicely evaluated, and better with regard to lawyers' point of view. But we will switch from this stressful topic. Hopefully,
Well,
we will
can I
never
ask
know.
ask you a real quick question? Like there are a lot of
Yes.
articles popping up right now. Like even highly mosaic embryos have become live birth rates, and ended up with healthy pregnancies and healthy kids actually. So what do you think about, like, I know that you have a genetic basis. What's your opinion as geneticist and also embryologist?
Well, this topic of mosaic embryos were kind of strangely looking for me from the very beginning, because when it comes to the pregnancy, we all know that the mosaicism rate is extremely low. So the real mosaicism is below 1%. So how can it happen that in pre-implantation embryos is like 10%? And no one, of course, tries to transfer these embryos because we are very scared. What if they are abnormal, right? And then more and more articles pop up. But what I believe, because I don't want to claim, I'm not blaming any geneticist. Don't get me wrong. Every genetic laboratory is on the safe side. For them, it's easier to claim the embryo to be abnormal and avoid transferring of this embryo with live birth of abnormal child than to give a chance for this embryo, because maybe that's an artifact of the study. What I think is that the majority of the mosaicism that we by now see on the PGTA result is the artifact of this whole system, how the whole genome amplification happens, how we read these reads, how we basically assess the picture of reading. And some companies, Cooper Genetics, for example, they use the artificial intelligence systems, machine learning in their assessment. And the question is that machine is trained by someone. So when it comes to the person always can make mistake, but we rely on the machines a lot by now. So who knows what they claim to be mosaicism? If the doctor, like the genetic counselor, told them that it's a mosaicism, they will assess the appropriate embryo as a mosaic embryo. And what I also see is that there is a different rates of mosaicism in any genetic laboratory. So you may biopsy embryos, you may work with one genetic laboratory, you will get like 10% mosaic embryos, and then you switch to the other genetic laboratory and boom, you have 5. What changed?
Actually, you know what? Like, I was always
I don't think
always thinking that, like, first of all, like, I don't know if there are these kind of articles pops up. I started to think about, Dr. Patricio's publication. So, that, like, he just asked, get the consents and transfer all abnormal embryos to the patients, and their ongoing pregnancy rate is 49.3, and miscarriage rate is 9.3. So it's they're really great numbers actually. So what are you thinking? I'm just asking you both ladies. So is it like maybe PGTA or this, technology is not it's not as trustworthy as we are think maybe, huh? What do you think?
I think that we over rely on it, though it really works, and it works in some cases. But the main in my opinion, we often have like misunderstanding in terms of PGTA. PGTA is good for avoiding abnormal pregnancy, but it's not good in increasing the pregnancy rates. Though I have the abstract that is stating absolutely different, but it's funny. Well, by the way, about that publication, they're very funny because they combined totally abnormal embryos and mosaic embryos in the same publication and called them abnormal. So it's like the name of the publication looks kind of juicy, but when you read, there's a very few abnormal embryos that actually were transferred. So I have two abstracts that I would like to mention, and they all are about transfer of mosaic embryos, and the outcomes are really impressive. It looks like we lose a lot of chances for our patients because we don't want to transfer embryos that are not considered to be totally euploid. Stephanie, do you have something to say?
No, I'm listening.
Okay, so guys, if you don't mind, I'd like to jump into the set of a couple of abstracts that were presented. Some of them were oral presentations, some of them were poster presentations, and some of them got prizes. And one of the topics that I would like to present is the basically assessment of the ploidy level for the embryos that go through the PGTA. So you know that during the NGS sequencing, next generation sequencing, we may have one of the flaws is that we cannot assess the ploidy of the embryo really efficiently. So what the iGenomics company presented, they were reassessing almost 8,000 embryos with their new technique that includes the assessment of SNPs together with basically reading whole genome amplification products after with NGS. So what they saw is that out of these biopsies that would have been tested to be normal according to standard approach, about 1.6% were considered to be haploid when the additional testing with SNPs was performed. Almost 4%, 3.5% were considered to be triploid. Surprise, surprise. And still not all of them were informative. So when they switched to the information that they also had about these embryos with regard to the number of pronuclease, they also saw that among those embryos that had 2 pronuclei on the fertilization check, almost 3.5% of tested embryos turn out to be triploid. So we either miss the 3rd pronuclei, or maybe it's never there. Maybe it's like totally beautiful zygote, we like it, we say, oh, good job to you, and then at the very end it's triploid embryo, we transfer it, and then boom, surprise. Not a pleasant one, of course. With 0 PN derived blastocysts, all tested embryos turn out to be haploid. It's only 5, so it's not so bad, right? And when it comes to 1 PN zygote, it's also not a lot. 10 of the tested, 8 were haploid and 2 were diploid. But what I also want to mention is that the other abstract that I just recently read claimed that in the majority of cases when it's 0 PN, conventional IVF derived blastocysts, they almost all turn out to be diploid. So they turn out to be normal. So once again, if after ICSI we have a blastocyst that didn't demonstrate any pronuclei, it's uh-oh. But if it happens after a conventional IVF that we mainly don't use, right, it is probably fine, and we just miss the appropriate pronuclei. So the question is that, do we still believe in fertilization assessment? And personally, I believe. I think it like this picture confirms that if we have abnormal fertilization already displayed, we have to be very careful with these embryos. But still, even if we saw distinct two prenuclei in the cytoplasm of the embryo, this embryo may be polyploid or haploid, and PGTA complete with the assessment of SNP is a good instrument to see the ploidy status of the embryos. Method of spermatozoa recovery, the next abstract, right? Method of spermatozoa recovery does not correlate with embryonic mosaicism. Boom, we go to mosaicism one more time. In patients with severe male factor. So there is a speculation that because they are patients with severe male infertility, tend to produce a lot of abnormal embryos because they definitely have something wrong with their sperm, especially if the sperm is retrieved through surgical procedures, then we may probably improve their quality, especially if we go about DNA fragmentation of spermatozoa. We may improve the quality of the embryos by trying to use the surgically retrieved spermatozoa from pretty fertile patients, fertile with the help of ICSI, but just in order to increase the chance to get the euploid better embryo, right? So this group was assessing the outcomes of PGTA cycles for 4 years, and they assessed the incidence of mosaicism in embryos that were derived from spermatozoa retrieved from ejaculate with a very severe oligo and for example oligo, terato, and oh my goodness, stenozoospermia, but they didn't actually provide all these categories. They just claimed that it was severe male infertility, and surgically retrieved through TISA spermatozoa. And what they saw, there is no improvement in the number, like there is no decrease in the number of mosaic embryos if we retrieve the spermatozoa from the TISA. So this technique, when we claim to patient that, well, we will cut the testicles because you do not produce good sperm, let's cut your testicles and then we will have more euploid embryos, less mosaic embryos, and everything will be better, doesn't work, at least according to this international study.
And also in Turkey, like there was a trend, like if the patient, like the couples, doesn't have good quality blastocysts, even if they have normospermic patients, the urologist sometimes asks the patients to do TESA or TESE to have better embryos, actually, because of they think that it is like their is exposed to less stress on the testis, so it can make good blastocysts. I mean, like they mentioned that one, but I mean, with this study, seems it's not as they told, I guess.
Well, yeah, and then the patient can sue you for the moral for torturing. So now we jump into that cohort of studies. There were plenty of abstract about the outcomes of mosaic embryos transfers, and one of them is basically what they did. It's a huge clinic. There is a predominance in ASRM. There's plenty of abstracts, plenty of talks. Like if you go to ASHA, you will see there's a lot of people who are talking on behalf of ED. Here is also ED RMA. So one of the biggest clinic that is situated in New Jersey released the study that what they actually did, they did not disclose the information about the mosaicism of the embryos. So all the embryos were tested to be either abnormal or euploid, and patient didn't know if they were given the right to disclose this information. If the patient doesn't want to go into the details and they're ready to be to transfer the embryo that is putatively mosaic, so they don't know exactly. It may be mosaic, may not, but the quality is good. And according to PGTA test, it's euploid, not abnormal. So they were transferring these embryos, and then they were assessing the outcomes of the cycles. And what actually happened, they saw that the implantation rates were going down with the transfer of the mosaic embryos, but look at the numbers. So basically, this is a segmental mosaicism. This is actually the euploid embryos. This is the segmental mosaicism, and this is the whole chromosome mosaicism. The numbers obviously are different, but not a lot. And clinical miscarriage rate was also comparable. So in their study, it looks like we can transfer the mosaic embryo without any problem. Almost the same outcome in regards with the complications and risk of the transfer was presented by the other oral presentation that included about almost 2,500 mosaic transferred embryos. So they claimed that the implantation rates were significantly lower, almost 37% in comparison with 52% for euploid embryos, but the clinical outcome and miscarriage rate was comparable. So looks like we should not be scared of it. By the way, the second study also assessed the real rate of the mosaicism in the pregnancies established after the transfer of mosaic embryos, and it was naturally very close to 1%. Almost the same as the natural conception. Funny abstract, that there is a lot of abstracts when you read them, you're like, I guess I knew that. Everyone knew that, but for some reason they go into the abstract book, and sometimes they even get the prize. But this one is basically about the impact of the thaw biopsy refreeze, the number of worm-ins, the number of biopsies, and the implantation potential of embryo. And guess what? If the embryo was biopsied, frozen, and wormed one time, it has higher implantation rate than the embryos that were frozen, then wormed, biopsied, frozen, and wormed one more time, or embryos that were rebiopsied. So they were not only frozen twice and wormed twice, but they were also rebiopsied because of no result or like confirmation, something. And guess what? Really, these embryos that were twice frozen, twice wormed, and especially they twice biopsied, have lower clinical pregnancy rates. Look, we can look here. This is control group. This is the group with thaw biopsy refreeze, and this is a group for thaw rebiopsy refreeze. The numbers are not so different, so you may still claim that it's safe for the embryo, and the embryo may implant after the procedure, but yeah, our chances go down. And this is a prize poster paper that is absolutely unbelievable in terms of the number of patients included. Look at that, it's 100,000, even more patients that were included in this study, and almost 100,000 embryos transferred. And what they actually showed, they are questioning if the recurrent pre-implantation failure actually exists. So if we have one transfer with euploid embryo and the patient fails, second patient fails, third patient fails, should we claim like, well, it's recurrent implantation failure, we should do something else, we should just invent the wheel and I don't know, go some magic, prayers, something else? No, they actually showed that the implantation rates for the fourth and fifth consecutive transfer of euploid embryo are very comparable to first, second, and third. So it looks like if we have the patient with plenty of euploid embryos and the first transfer fails, second transfer fails, third transfer fails, it looks like we should just go on, and then the miracle will happen. Though I don't know if patient is okay with such
Never
type of
quit.
explanation. And the last...
Never quit, I said. Like, never quit.
Sorry? Yeah, never quit. Yeah. And finally, the last one that I personally really like, because it looks like we more or less we hear a lot. We hear a lot about ultra rapid warming. Two abstracts were presented this time about the comparable outcomes of ultra rapid warming technique and standard one. So it looks like it's safe. One of the groups even presented the congenital results, so they didn't find any difference between two groups, and they claim that it's not safe on the level of embryo, not only safe on the level of implantation potential, but the live birth outcome is very similar for these two techniques. I know that it's widely used in Turkey already, so just go on, guys. Looks like you're doing a good job. And the last one that I would like to present is basically, I find it interesting because it looks like something smells a huge change, because it's actually also a price paper. So they what they did, they used the oral GnRH antagonist as a trigger, and quite a small group of patients, not a lot, right? So they have very, very small control group with a typical injection trigger, and quite big in comparison to control, but still it's only 59 cases of the elagolics. I have no idea, maybe it's pronounced in a different way, but it's like oral administration of a GnRH antagonist. And what we can see is that they have absolutely same drop in LH, and they also have the same number of the oocytes retrieved, like of course with correction, though the ages, like the groups were compared. But looks like this type of a treatment may actually be as effective as injection. But what is very pleasant for us and our patients, look at the price. $20 for the oral treatment and almost $200 for the injection. So this pure step may really influence the cost efficiency of the treatment, at least in the cycles where the GnRH is used as antagonist is used as a trigger. So are we have a new player on the stimulation field? Who knows? Let's see what's gonna happen the next year. But hopefully it's gonna be even better, because we want it to be better and cheaper, right? So this was my last slide. Thank you. You obviously, as it was already mentioned, you can check the other ASRM abstracts. There's not a lot of arguable ones, because the ASRM is very, very cautious when it comes to some experimental techniques that are used in some other countries. But still, you may find something interesting for your practice and for yourself. Thank you for your attention. It was a pleasure to talk to you guys and to Şükür.
You're great, Olga, always. Thank you, Steph and Olga. Do we have any questions?
I can.
Everyone is reading the abstract.
So, like the last abstract that you present is nice also. So, like while we were talking, being cheap, I always think that being simple is the best way. I mean, in the lab, I don't like those kind of, like, if there is no scientific background, add-ons are just I think a little bit for, money or for some placeable kind of like if we are going to about like going simple and cheap. So, and with these results, actually, what are we thinking about PGTA again? I would like to say. Ipek is writing something. Anila is like writing. I think next year we're going to see more AI-based publications, I guess, presentations at ASRM, I guess. What do you think, guys?
I think so. Murat, maybe you can answer this from your own personal experience. How common is how are time-lapse systems in the bigger clinics in Turkey or in any clinics? Is it common to have one, or is it still kind of a new?
Actually, it is common. It's because like patients are asking those kind of things. Like when you said that, okay, we are culturing our embryos in time lapse, so it is really like patients don't know that one, but if you say that, okay, like we're just checking their morphokinetics and decided their developmental or implantation rates according to their morphokinetic thingy, so patients are asking those kind of things. But I'm not pretty sure, like, if it is a really big and crowded lab, so doing those morphokinetic, assessments, I mean, it seems a little bit, like, how could I say, hard to do those kind of things in a busy lab. I mean, but
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's going to be helpful for embryology, for implantation and ongoing pregnancy rates, but I mean, it should be done properly. I mean, most of the clinics, bigger clinics has time-lapse systems, but most of them, I guess, using as time-lapse system as spare embryologist, like, because you can do ICSI earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easier and convenient, kind of.
Yeah.
Eli asked a question: can AI evaluate the cleavage stage, or does it only evaluate through the blast view? And do you also use it in sperm selection? Additionally, does AI provide predictions about live birth rate? Thank you. I can say about the sperm, I'm just nowadays I'm a little bit interested in the sperm selection with the AI. There are some studies actually, but they are so preliminary studies right now. They find out, like, how could they do is, like, we know that their chromosomal nuclei change if there is DNA damage. So they are using some holotomographic lights emission kind of. I'm not really familiar because it's a little bit engineered kind of thing. And with their outcome, they can find out the healthy sperm. They claim that they find out the healthy sperm versus DNA damaged sperm. And they started to do that one in a petri dish just before the ICSI, so it's real time kind of things. I'm really curious about it. I'm really hopeful about it if they can find out that. But what do you think about the cleavage stage and blastocyst stage thing, Stephanie? Basically, like in our lab we have time lapse system, and it's also AI based, right? So, like, can you just tell us about your experience?
I would say yes, the AI systems are designed to be looking at morphokinetic parameters from FERT on. So yes, it is evaluating cleavage stage, time to cleavage, etc., and fragmentation, all sorts of parameters that you can program it for. It depends on your AI system, of course, but the idea is to end up with a score of some sort that takes into account all of the steps from fertilization on. So yes, it is evaluating cleavage stage. It's evaluating time to morulation, time to early blast, time to expansion. There's so many parameters and characteristics that you can look at, and you can train an AI system to learn. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of repetitive learning action. But yeah, the idea is from the beginning, through cleavage, through compaction, through cavitation, etc. It's looking at the entire, I guess, timeline of that embryo's development. And does it provide predictions about live birth rate? Yes, it does have some correlation, and it's similar to what the embryologist, so the live reader, how they predict as well. It can be used, as Murat said, at this point, you can use it as another embryologist in the lab, but that's, it's meant to be more than that, but it depends on your lab. It depends on the learning, I guess, system that you might have in place. But yeah, the idea is eventually it would make, infallible predictions about birth rate. It's not 100%, not yet.
Yep.
But thank you, great questions.
Okay then. So thank you everybody, for the presentation, Olga and Stephanie. Darren is writing something. So thanks very much for this brief and, as İpek says, comprehensive and summarized presentations. So thanks very much. Herkese katılmalarından dolayı çok teşekkür ediyorum. Umarım keyif almışsınızdır. Hoşça kalın diliyorum. Yes, I said hoşça kal. Olga.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Bye bye.
Maybe we'll see you at ASRM next. Thank you. Maybe we'll see you
Yes,
at
maybe.
ASRM next year at the meeting.
Yes, maybe.